All right, here's another example. Another student emailed asking for help on their project work. They seem to have everything in place, but when they went to run, the data that they have the code here to seed was not showing up. So this will be a good, quick example to have a look at here and how we can debug a situation like this. So uh, maybe before I get into that, I'll just mention the student has, as I do in my example here, these two commands at the top of the class where we ensure the database is deleted and we recreate it every once in a while. That's the best thing to do, when you're making little changes here and there and so on. Then that's perfectly fine. Just be aware though that this does mean that every time you run, you lose any data. So if you've been playing around a little bit, modifying a few records to, testing how things are working, next time you stop and start, you're right back to square one in terms of the data. It'll be exactly as you seed it. So, it's fine to have this here, but what I'll often do is, once I've made a change to anything in the system, right, then I'll come in and I'll comment that out because I don't really need to ensure it's deleted every time. I want to ensure it's created. Okay, that's fine. And then I'll seed all my data and away we go. Okay. All right, and by the way, ensure created doesn't do anything if it is there, so it doesn't hurt to have that there. We could comment them both out for that matter, but I usually just play with the ensure deleted. All right, so their issue was that when they run, they don't get any data, right? So whenever there's problems with seeding, as I've talked about before, come down here and set a breakpoint inside the catch block, right? All right, so let's just actually run this and see what happens. And we come up here, loading, 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 and it's just sitting there, right? Well, let's come back to Visual Studio and see what's going on. All right, so here it has stopped, okay? We're adding range here, we're adding data. So we've come down to when we're adding the function. So it got through the code for the first two, the customer and the function type, but it stopped here, right? Okay, now see it's still in the middle, so I'll actually just tell it to skip over, get down here. Okay, now we're in the exception. Okay, so I can actually then do that once more, and we get down, and now we're past the EX object, so it contains the information we really need. So let me expand it down here, right? Object reference is not set to the instance of an object, okay? And, okay, not set to the instance of an object. So what does that actually tell us, right? By the way, just want to show you that you can also just hover over. Sometimes it's easier to read up here and see what's going on. So object reference not set to an instance of an object. Okay, so sometimes the messages tell you exactly what's going on, and sometimes they're a little bit more vague, right? So what that seems to tell me is that, okay, based on that fact and where we stopped in code, it was as we were trying to create, let me go back to our initializer here. It was when we were trying to create the functions. So what object could be missing? Well, I've got two link queries here getting objects, right? Where then I find out what the ID is. One is this customer, the related parent on that relationship, and then the function type to find out the ID of the function type. So it indicates that I'm getting a null object. So the odds are these are not returning their data, right? I'm not getting data for customer ID and function ID. Why not? Well, let's have a look up here. Okay. Now, what we know, even let's look at the bottom down here and look at the other examples, right? Here is where we actually call save changes. Remember, the add range just adds a range of objects, okay, to a collection, right? But it doesn't actually save the changes until we tell it to. So that is the problem here, I think. So here we are, we're making sure if we don't have any customers, and we're going to add these ones that are hard-coded, this range of customers. But what we're missing is our call to save changes, right? So context dot save changes. Okay, so I'll add that after customers. Do the same thing here for function type because it's missing off of here as well. And so now we should actually have the data in the database. So when we get down here and execute these queries to go and find, right, the actual customers and function types and so on, and get the value so we can get the ID and assign it to these foreign keys, hopefully it'll work this time. So I'll leave my breakpoint where it is. I'll just try running again. All right. Ooh, we didn't stop this time. Does that mean we have data? Look at that. So the breakpoint is still there. So it never hit the breakpoint because we didn't raise any exceptions. The student has successfully got all of their data seeding now, and that was just a simple little mistake, easy to do. In fact, I believe in my demo, when I was just copying and pasting from my text file, I accidentally left out the call to save changes. So I did exactly the same thing as this student did, right? So it's easily done. It's the kind of thing that, you can see that the approach of setting a breakpoint, going in, figuring out what should be happening in the code, what does the error message tell you isn't happening, and then you can narrow it down. Sometimes, as I said, the uh, inner exception, the error message itself is very specific. Other times it's a little more vague and you can't have to put your thinking cap on. But when I knew there were objects missing, that they were null when they shouldn't be, I looked for, well, what objects are being asked for in the code in question? And we were able to figure it out. So now that we're actually saving changes on these up here, we're able to create the actual functions too. Thank you to the student who shared this issue with us.